This time on the Unlucky Woodworker, we're going to make an end grain cutting board. The three woods here are maple at the top, purple heart at the bottom left, and walnut at the bottom right. So first we just cut each of these boards down to different widths. So I started with thicker width and worked through each board, and then a little thinner and a little thinner. And here's the purple heart, which is a beautiful wood from South America, but it's extremely dense and frequently gives some difficulty to my tools. But once I got that sorted out, I was able to get to the walnut and work my way through them. So here you can see some of the thinner strips, and I'm just working with this crosscut sled to make sure they're all the same length. Once all the pieces are cut, then it's time for the fun part, which is figuring out what kind of pattern you want to make. This part is really easy, so you'll probably spend no more than a minute on it and try just one or two combinations until you get something that looks great. There's no way that you would end up spending, say, 30 minutes on it trying every possible combination and never finding the one that quite looks right. So you can expect that this part will go very quickly and you'll end up very happy with any combination that you choose. So don't expect to spend more than, a minute on this. Maybe 2 minutes. Once I eventually figured out what I wanted these to look like, I got the two on the right. The left side are my extra scraps for the next project. And my idea here is that I will cut the two on the right and intersperse like every other piece to create an interesting pattern. Now it's just a matter of putting them on some clamps, flipping them on their sides, and applying a generous amount of glue. It's important to apply plenty of glue here because you want these to bond really well to each other, so I just spread it out with my finger. You may also want to put some either packing tape or wax paper or something on the clamps themselves so that the glue doesn't get on them, or you can just clean it off afterwards. And I just make sure that the sides are reasonably close to each other. It doesn't have to be perfect because we'll saw off one side of it later and then make each of the pieces from this. Once things look good, I slowly apply a little bit more pressure, make sure things are looking good, a little more, and then I used an overly wet paper towel to wipe away some of the glue so I could flip this piece over and apply one more clamp right in the middle. Everything's glued together and I can undo the clamps. This is actually the second board, but at this point I need to make sure everything is flat. And I don't have a planer, which is ideal for this, so I have to sand it, and I realize that I need to hold it in place while I sand it. So I just grab this scrap piece of some pallet wood, chop it into a few different pieces, and then I can put it around each of the edges. And the pallet wood's a little bit thinner, so it won't get in the way of using the sander here. So this is one time when a impact driver is really nice because I can just slam those screws in there. I don't have to worry about being precise. And start sanding it with this belt sander. And then I realized that maple was, all this wood was supposed to be 3/4 of an inch thick, but that maple was a little bit thicker than that. So I ended up switching to the hand plane to try to get it down a bit closer to the rest of the wood. Eventually I realized that my blade was nicked and not all that sharp, so I took it out and just got a much better edge on it so that I could get back to the joy of hand planing this yet again. This was a lot of hand planing until these end pieces got pretty close, and you can see all the little shavings that are building up here. This is probably the most planing that I've done on this small of a project ever, but it's good exercises maybe. So once the planing was pretty good and the pieces seemed reasonable, then I could switch back over to the sander, and using this belt sander, which is really aggressive, I can get this even closer. You can see quite a bit of sawdust building up from this. I don't have a hose connection for my shop vac to be able to pull that out, so I just have to fill up the bag. But you can see it's finally smooth, and the next step is to just cut off the ends so that we make sure we have a completely flush and smooth edge, and then start making the cuts from there. Here, really just cutting off pretty much the width of the blade to get it flush, and then now we can move over the fence, and I think I did this about 1.25 inches or 1.125 inches, somewhere in there, to get it pretty close to make each of these strips, and then it's just a matter of passing this chunk of laminated wood through over and over to get a bunch of these strips. And I'm a little picky with getting the fence just right, even though it doesn't really matter. So I put the guard back on for safety and just push this through one piece after another. And the idea is each of these pieces will be combined with the pieces from the other one, and then this can be glued together. So here's the other one. Just doing the same process, exact same position for the table saw and fence and everything. So now I pull the temporary holders out of here so that I have more of a large surface to work with, and start looking at what this pattern will be like. And I notice a problem that you may or may not be able to see here, and that's I didn't do that great of a job sanding, so these really aren't that even. You can see pretty significant gaps in here. And that's because the maple on either end is a lot thicker. So I decided maybe I'll try the stationary belt sander, and the nice thing here is that I can kind of look at it from down below and see how much of a gap there is to try to get that maple down to the same thickness. On the left are the ones that I've sanded, on the right are the ones still to go. So you can see I'm getting closer, but this was a lot of sanding. Now it's time to just glue these all together. So it's a very simple task, except I had apparently done enough sanding at this point that my brain was no longer working, and I decided to pour the glue on top of all of these pieces instead of on the side. This is basically how it should look when it's finished in terms of the orientation, so I need to flip all these to the sides and glue them. Eventually I realized that and decide, okay, I'll try to use a wet cloth and wipe away some of the glue, and it's not working that well because I had spread it pretty well and the pieces keep falling over, so I decided, okay, fine, I'm just going to glue all the sides together, and then I can try to sand the top yet again and get rid of any of the glue that's still left there. So again, important to use a lot of glue here and spread it out really well. You can see a couple of these pieces aren't quite even yet, so the glue as I'm spreading it is a little bit uneven, and I have to go back in a few of the areas. I'm just using a little piece of cardboard as a big flat surface to spread this around. So I get these on the clamps, add a little bit more glue, and just flip, one by one, adding glue for any of them that seem like they need a little more. First I put 2 clamps on it and squeezed those together a little bit, and then scraped away that glue squeeze out and some of the extra surface glue that I had on there from my earlier mistake. And then I was able to add 2 more clamps, give it a bunch of pressure, and let it sit overnight. I came back and pulled those clamps off, and the first thing I did was start looking at it to see how it turned out, to make sure there weren't any big gaps that I needed to take care of. Fortunately, that was good, but there was a lot of glue on one side and a lot of burn marks on the other. So that meant time for some more sanding. If you're ever looking for a project with a lot of sanding, this is a great choice. And since it's all end grain, it takes a lot more sanding to make small progress. You can see each of these burn marks as I sand away, trying to make all the pieces even, but also trying to get rid of some of that surface where the burn marks are. So they slowly get lighter and lighter, and I work my way through it and also make sure all the pieces are even when they're connected to each other. I could have applied a couple extra boards while clamping them to force them to be a little bit more even, but that would take away all the fun of breaking multiple bolts trying to sand everything down. You might also notice that multiple boards slipped while they were gluing, so you can see the right edge is not very even. So I end up cutting those off to make sure things look good on the sides, but that also means that the pattern in the center doesn't quite line up, which was a little bit frustrating. Once I got the edges even, then I was able to just take it over to the round over bit on the router and work my way across just to make sure there weren't any sharp edges. What I found was that my really cheap bit added some more burn marks, so back to sanding yet again. You can never have too much practice sanding. So I felt the top and then the sides and made sure everything was smooth and realized that I was done sanding finally. This project had really worn me down on the sanding front. I think maybe that's a sanding joke. I cleaned off the top of it to kind of inspect for scratches and see how it looked. There were quite a few scratches, but I decided it's a cutting board, it's going to get scratched, and I'm tired of sanding. So once that dried off, then I moved on to the finishing step, which is really easy. You just have to apply some kind of oil that's food safe. It can be a mineral oil. It's also sold as butcher block oil, which is just the same thing. And all you have to do is really apply a bunch of it, rub it around the top and around the sides, and then you give it 5 minutes to soak in and rub off any of the excess. And you end up doing this at least a few times. So you do it this first time, then you give it a day or a few days and do it again, and then a few weeks or a month and do it once more. So here's where I step away from the project and give it 5 minutes of sped up time to soak in, and this lets the wood fibers kind of pull in some of that oil, and then you can come back after those 5 minutes and wipe away the little bit of excess that's still on there.